the organization that we work in, and it's really quite hard to break down those walls to the other areas. So collaboration is such a useful skill that I wanted to really have a good look at it. What does it look like? Why we're doing it? It's not just the idea of many hands make light. We're working on the mawhero pango kaoti ai te mahi. But there are so many benefits to collaboration when we collaborate with the teachers who visit us, when we collaborate within the sector, and when we provide opportunities for learners to collaborate within the programs that we run so they can practice those skills. The collaborations that we have seen have been quite vast, quite different in different sectors, and the examples have all been, that were reported to us and that I then refer to for the course, have all been really positive. There could be negative experiences out there as well, we know that, but you know, people chose to share all the positives, so I feel it is a real strength to add to our kete.
Thanks, Monika. And I just want to acknowledge, if you're watching the recording, I forgot to get the beginning of the recording, but we opened with karakia and we introduced ourselves. So apologies for that, but you're getting the main content. So that's the main thing now. I really like your point, Monika, about making many hands making light work. I was very fortunate to have been heavily involved with Connected Educator for a couple of years. That was, it was designed over a month, but it evolved over a year, where it encouraged teachers around the country to connect and collaborate together. So sometimes it might have been just as simple as throwing out to the network, I'm struggling with knowing how to do this, or have you got a new idea for me to be able to teach this? And then the network would be able to feed back in with ideas. And other times it was almost about setting up teams or interest groups together where people would work on a resource that they would co-design and then would use in their classroom. So it can be a whole range of things, but it's that ability to be able to put something out and have people feed in and be able to share what they're doing, because we're not all experts in everything. You've seen my lack of expertise in Facebook. And it's just like the more we can work together and share, the richer we become and the better we serve our communities and better serve our learners.
And I think you made a really important point there, Tara, about the idea that the education sector, the teacher sector, is quite well connected through various media that have been around for years. I mean, it is a much larger sector than we are, and it is a sector that has had considerable investment in professional development that included that kind of connecting people together with it. The platforms that associated, going back to the teacher work in this regard, is interesting though, because not everybody is on the same platform. Like you mentioned, Facebook is not your preferred medium to work in. So, you know, it is really hard to spread yourself thinly and put it out in the ether in all of different places. When we started on the Tipo Tiaki Manatanga project, we thought really carefully about how we're going to go and do this. And we decided that having a Google site would be important. But we also heard from the sector that a lot of us were on Facebook, and therefore Facebook became the preferred method of communicating out to the sector alongside with the emails. So it's really interesting seeing the background here. Tara, maybe you want to elaborate on that a little bit, on Bridget's question?
Yeah, so the Museums Aotearoa are developing a platform. I'm not sure whether it's as a response to the MCH funding or not, because they're fairly far through. And it's funny because I just before this hui, I'd come in from a hui with Adele Fitzpatrick, who's the chair of MA. It's sounding really good. It would be an ideal platform. However, it is only for Museums Aotearoa members. So one of the things I don't want to do is be active on that platform and not have other members who aren't MA members be able to join. So Adele's going to come in and talk to us. It'll be a couple of months away about the platform and how they hope to use it. I think we'll have a home there, but until we know most of our members are in that space, we'll probably carry on touch wood or cross my fingers with the Facebook and with our website and with our courses as well, which I know are all on different platforms, but at the moment we've tried to do that. So one, it's free, because the committee don't charge fees, so we needed platforms we could host for free, but 2, so that it was accessible and cost wasn't a barrier to our members. So in saying that, I acknowledge that our Future Learn courses do cost after a certain period of time, but on the whole, we hope everyone can complete them during that period of free access. But we don't want cost to be a barrier, but I'm very excited to see what Museums Aotearoa will be doing. So watch this space. We'll keep you updated, and Adele and her team will be in to talk more about the platform in a couple of months.
That would be really good to hear from them. Yeah, so it's an interesting balance act, isn't it? We are people. How can we reach out to them as we are developing collaboration? But at the same time, how can we not limit those people due to membership restrictions? So when we found people that we can collaborate with, it is probably, you know, despite all this online learning, all the online connections, COVID and so on, face-to-face is still really important in making those personal connections. And that's actually what all the different culture and heritage educators I spoke to about collaboration have stressed. There has always been an aspect of face-to-face. But of course, one of the projects that we were involved in that Tara had set up made it a lot harder, because the partners that were collaborating within that were a lot further away from each other.
And I might just go to that now, Monika, and then we can come back for a group discussion with some of those questions. So what Monika's talking about is Raranga Matihiko, a Weaving Digital Futures program. Now, that was government funded, and it was aimed to support teachers in school with a focus on equity. So it enabled us to bring in students from around the country into our museums and support their understanding of the whare or the tonga that we hold in our whare, and also around digital technology. So it was designed to support the digital technologies. But that was, even though that was how it was funded, it was actually a program that introduced students to the space. It showed them potential career paths, and they got to spend 2 days in the museum. So during that time, Walter Papa, we designed and led it here. We actually had 6 partners. So over the time, we worked obviously with Waitangi Treaty Grounds for the whole 4 years the program was running. Waikato Museum, Auckland Art Gallery, Auckland Museum, MTG Hawke's Bay, and I have a feeling I'm forgetting one of our partners. No, I think I've got them all. And so we worked the funding allowed us to staff educators in each space, but even though we were different sites and 6 different sites over that time, we had a very strong collaborative network, and it was through that we realised the power of talking and sharing our practices. Because if we were working with a particular topic, we could get people to feed in. You know, we designed bespoke programs for every class that came in, and some of the topics we got were a little interesting, but we could put it out to the team and say, you know, I've got, for example, I know the Waitangi team had one on physics one year, and they were trying to link physics into the Waitangi Treaty Grounds, which they did successfully. But, you know, sometimes putting it out to your fellow teammates, whether they're in your office or wider, saying, I've got this topic, what can I do with it? Or co-designing resources together, you know, that shared expertise, that many hands make light work that Monika was talking about. And I know in our sector, we're very time poor, so the more we can do that, the better it is. But Monika, you might like to talk about the benefits of that collaboration, particularly from the perspective of a smaller sized or smaller than Te Papa sized museum space.
Yeah, it was really interesting because I often look at collaboration in these 3 spaces, you know, collaborating with the teachers, collaborating with in the sector, and then collaboration of students. So that was definitely a sector collaboration, and it was very interesting because it opened our eyes to what else was out there. And yes, that physics one, that was my topic, and I was going like, holy moly, I don't know where to start with this one because physics has never been my forte. But you know, yes, exactly as Karen said, now talking about the whare and Newton's law of motion, and you know what forces are involved in chopping down the flagstaff, and you know, so we came up with an amazing amount of things out of there. What was really interesting was that through this collaboration, which I have to say, at no time did we feel like the disadvantaged little brother or anything like that. In fact, we felt really privileged to be part of this and be given the opportunity. We had this exposure to people who came from all sorts of backgrounds into the culture and heritage space, and that initially straight away enriched what we were doing, but it also helped us to tap into what other sites were offering in programs that we at Waitangi were not offering, you know. So we had, for example, the opportunity to speak to the educators in the Hawke's Bay who had taonga that we would never bring to Waitangi, and we could offer our students that kind of experience, just really making a difference for the learners. The professional learning was a really important aspect for us as well, because as a smaller size organization, it's really hard to access professional learning, especially if you're in the beautiful Bay of Islands. It's not that easy to go to places. It's quite expensive, and taking, you know, even just taking the educators to Auckland, it's basically a day to get there and then a day to get back home again. You know, this is all time that you can't spend on other things. That made a really great difference. But being part of a network that you knew you could pick up the phone or send out a message to someone at the other end of the country, and they would pick it up and they would be there, that was probably the most important part of it, especially after having come out of the very connected education sector.
And I have to say too, just to add to what Monika said, we only got together, and we were fortunate to get together, but it was only once a year. So everything else was done virtually. We'd have a time a week where we'd meet virtually, but everything else was done asynchronously. So it was done through a shared chat, a whole different thing. And the expectation was you just put something out there and you knew in time the team would be able to come back and respond. So, and this was pre-COVID, when some of our spaces were just getting into using virtual platforms to communicate, and it was a really effective way. And the project was made so much better because of the strength of our partners and because of the strength that we could record. So the strength that we could share our expertise on. So it was highly effective in that regard. But I'm also keen, Monika's just thrown a question out in the chat, which was good because that's exactly where I was heading to. What kind of different work collaborations have you been part of? It's sort of, we'd love to hear from you now about what you've been part of, what's been effective, because not all collaborations are, and it's not always easy to collaborate with different groups. But when we can get it right, it works successfully well. So feel free to either respond to Monika's question using the chat, or if you like, take the mic. We'd love to hear from you and hear what's working.
Now, if you're unsure about taking the mic, down the bottom of your screen, you should hopefully see a reaction. And within the reactions, there's a raise a hand if you want to get started like that. But, you know, we are a small enough group. So if anybody wants to take the mic, just go ahead with that.
Oh, well, I can start and say something if you like. Kia ora, I'm Amanda. I've just been doing, I just sort of started really the local school down here in Arrowtown, trying to work on kind of like a school-wide from year 0 to 8 curriculum document to cover aspects of Aotearoa New Zealand histories. So I've been working with a DP and one of the teachers on that, and trying to fit in where the Lakes District Museum can kind of, you know, slot in and add to that, and just looking at, the know, understand, do sections, and then try to link it all to the big key ideas. So that's my little sort of outside collaboration at the moment, which is great.
It's fantastic. And what do you think is going to be the learning out of this for you and or the school?
Well, for me, really, it just sort of helps to sit down with the teachers and see where they're placed and what they're thinking, but then also kind of get this really big picture idea for especially enriching local curriculum that I can apply now to like lots of other local schools that come to me. I've got this document sitting there that I can sort of refer to and say, hey, this is what we're thinking about for this year level. So hopefully it'll have a wider use as well.
It is so cool, Amanda, because, you know, hopefully you will get more students through the door through it, but that's often the side effect. But really, the big thing out of there is the learning that you're taking away and how you can apply that to other learners. So that is this is just one of the prime examples of an effective collaboration, isn't it? Where you take something away that spins off something else from there. So anybody else who has got that opportunity, you know, go forth and and see how that can develop. Amanda, would it be all right if anybody has questions, if they want to reach out to you?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, I can pop my email address down in the chat, or anyone can ask me questions. Yeah.
Awesome. Thanks so much, Amanda. Sorry to put you on the spot there. I did not ask this before. I just saw Lisa's message, also with schools trying to engage students with development of our local heritage trail, but need funding for our time. Yeah, that is the challenge for many of us, isn't it? The Creative in Schools program, that's a really interesting program. I wonder if anybody else has looked into that.
Yeah.
I know the funding round's just open for that too. I'll find the link, Monika, and pop it in there. And I see Bridget's put a comment in too. Whoops, I'll head away and find the link.
Thank you for that, Tara. Amanda, you just put your hand up, eh? Thank you for your link too. Yeah.
Yeah, as well. This is with a specific year group for year 5s and 6 at Arrowtown School. There's a local, she's not a teacher, but she has done a lot with Creative New Zealand. She's got funding to run this program for term 3 and 4. And I don't know if it's got it right here, but it's a 2-term project, and she's involved me again, where the museum can come in and help, or I can do some programs that tie in with their whole theme. So.
Awesome. Hopefully, Lisa, that's going to be some assistance to what you're looking at. I like that Bridget has a slightly different collaboration that she talks about in her comment about the Ministry of Ed contract. I assume that's the ELC contract, the Enhancing Local Curriculum contract, between themselves and the Otorohanga Kiwi House and Native Species, collaborating across environmental education. Now that would be super interesting. So I don't know if you want to take the mic and tell us any more about that, Bridget. Oh, sorry, Bridget. No mind.
That's an example of not collaborating when someone steals your mic.
Exactly. That's all right. What we love to hear from you, even through some messages at some stage, Bridget. Really interested to hear. Now, Josie, you just put your hand up. Do you want to go and take the mic?
Oh, kia ora koutou. I'm Josie Whelan from Pātaka. It's lovely to see you all. I just wanted to share some work that I did prior to coming to Pātaka. I worked with Scape Public Art in Otatahi, Christchurch, and I did a couple of collaborative projects with other ELC educators, which kind of looked like a day-long program. So they'd do something with me in the morning, which was connected to the public artworks, and then they'd do something with a gallery educator at the museum. Sorry, not the gallery, at the museum. And so I guess what that brought to the students was just that kind of richer learning, thinking about similar ideas in a different way, and they were obviously both still off-site. So they were fantastic to work with in terms of working with another educator in a different space. And I think it just brought a huge richness to what the Ākonga were learning about. And I'm really keen to, and I also did some work at the gallery as well, collaborating, again, looking at a similar thing with the students that they'd been working on with me, and then shifting it into a different zone and taking that learning to a deeper place in another context. And then I guess in the work that we're doing here at Pātaka, we're very connected or collaborate with mana whenua. We work really closely with Ngāti Toa, and in fact we have an iwi host who is with Ngāti Toa, who helps deliver some of our historical programs in the Whititira exhibition. So that's a very connected collaboration. So they're just a couple of examples, and I'm going to be working with someone else on a planting program, so that students will have a session with me here at the gallery and museum, and then move out to do some riparian planting in connection to our local harbour and our waterways here. So I'm all up for it. If there are any Wellington educators out there who want to connect and take the learning in a different or connected direction with any of the Pātaka programs, please get in touch, because it's great fun, and it's really wonderful to see the delight in the students when they're getting another awesome experience from another educator in a different way. So yeah, get in touch if you want to do something together.
Great, thanks, Josie. And you might like to put your email in the chat if you're happy to share it. If not, that's fine.
Okay.
People will know how to contact you at Pātaka. Either way, they're really good examples. One of strengthening your own expertise by working with another educator, because you can learn so much from that, and often we're quite siloed in our work. So that opportunity to be able to work and see others practice. But for ākonga and their teachers, that seamless nature that you make from being able to support them to come to your space and then work in another space is absolutely excellent. And when we know how much transport costs, the more we can do things like that, the better it is, because we'll know if they come to us having visited the other place, we'll know what the content is, we'll probably experience the program, so we know how to build on that in our spaces as well. It just makes it so much richer all round. And I'm quite sure you will get some contact from some of our Wellington educators going there. But as you were talking about your examples, particularly the ones in Ototahi, it reminded me, here in Wellington at Te Papa, one of our educators, Laura Jones, has often worked with the Wellington City Art Gallery. So similar, like you described, they come and do part of the program there and then finish off the program, or vice versa. And it is just, everyone talks about it so well, about the power of sharing practice from the museum side of thing. But from a teacher and learner perspective, it is really about that, making the most of an experience, and it becomes much more cohesive for them too. Great. Thank you for putting your email address in. Right, Monika, you go.
Sorry, just like to jump over the top there. Another thought I had in another form of collaboration that can be super effective, but we don't often get the chance for it, when we can go and co-facilitate. That has been quite magic. We did a lot of that during Raranga Matehiko, not necessarily all the time, 2 educators in the room with 20, 30 kids. Sometimes, half the group is one educator out on the floor, half the group in the classroom doing something else. But it's actually really good practice where you can to model this to visiting teachers. Not only is it can it be a very effective teaching practice, but it also provides a lot of professional development at the same time, because the way your colleague might approach something teaches you something new. Sometimes it is easier to go and split a program even within an organization. And I know my team at Waitangi have done that in the last little while a little bit. So one of them might take a group through the museum. I think Karen and Lynnie did that the other day. And then after Karen had finished, Lynnie took that group up and then gave them a different experience out on the ground, which connected to what Karen had understood in the museum. And it gives that, like Josie talked about, that additional richness by having 2 different people talk about a similar content, a similar principles, similar ideas, but from a slightly different angle. And I think it can be really rich. How to make this happen is always the question, because not often are we fortunate enough to actually have 2 educators that can dedicate time to the same project at the same time. But if you can make it happen, especially in the quieter winter time, I really encourage you to have a look at that. It's not always easy though, is it?
It's not always easy, but sometimes it might just be opportunities like Josie shared with us, where you're designing a program that works between 2 spaces, or it might just be it's a one-off program and you get the opportunity to do it for a day or for a week, so that you can share and learn, because it is good professional development to see others practice. I see Lisa's put in the chat, any ideas how to get funding for cultural advisors to pay mana whenua for their time in an advisory capacity? I really like that question, Lisa, because that acknowledges that we shouldn't expect anyone to give their time for free, particularly when places like mana whenua are inundated with requests particularly from schools at the moment, but they have a lot on their plate. So I like the idea of acknowledging it. I don't know the answer for that, where to get funding. Josie, because you do your work so well with Ngāti Toa, I don't know whether you've got a response you can come in with, but feel free to answer that, or anyone else that might know of funding streams for that.
If I can just add in a little bit in terms of connecting with mana whenua, yeah, was that the so different iwi will have funding that they may be able to make available if they're contacted directly. If it's, I mean, people can be as creative as they like about how they may want to fund something. I think that's, for any organisation, it's good to remember that. And definitely here at Pātaka, we did have a cadetship program with Ngāti Toa that was run for a time. That's kind of evolved into something else now. But I think, you know, it's, yeah, I might not be able to say exactly too much more kind of in that space, but yeah, that's probably about it from me, I think. But be creative in terms of who might be able to fund it, and yeah.
Yeah, great. Thank you, Josie. I know that it's never easy to answer these questions, but it's a great solution, or one option, I should say. Lisa, I see you've got your hand up. Would you like to take the mic?
Oh, kia ora koutou. Yeah, thanks for that, Josie. That's awesome. I'm a volunteer in Waitangi in a small community, very small community museum, and we are developing a heritage trail. But what we want to do is, rather than engage mana whenua towards the end, which often happens, we want that to be happening right from the word go in terms of what pūrākau and what stories are shared. So I'm going to be applying for some funding for the development of this heritage trail and working in with the school. But I'd like to build the funding for that cultural advisory capacity in the application. So yeah, so just popping it there. I'll put my email address, the Hikurangi Museum, but if anyone has any ideas of how it could be embedded, it's not something as we go forward, whether it's yeah, I talked to our local district council and they said anything like that needs to go to a museum network, whether it's Te Papa or so forth. And I'm just really conscious, like you said, our local hapu are just on so many panels, they're just pulled in so many different directions, and I feel a little bit whakama asking for advice. And our collection, it needs to have some advisory work done on it. You know, it's very much a white settlers museum, you know, a settlers museum, and we understand that we need to change things, so we are going to need some ongoing input. But anyway, yeah, so I'll put my email address. Any ideas, please? Thank you very much.
Great, thanks, Lisa. And I acknowledge all you say. It's not easy, and particularly when you're a volunteer yourself, to be looking for funding opportunities. One of the things I've just put a link into the chat for MCH funding. I'm not sure what they've got available at the moment on the site, but I thought it's good for you to go in and have a look, because you'll know what you're trying to do and where it can go. I'll also find National Services link, because I understand they do some funding. But Monika, while I'm doing that, I can see you've got your hand up, so over to you.
Yeah, I was just thinking, Lisa, I don't know if you've met Fiona from Russell Museum, through the Northern Museums Association. They have got a project running in Russell at the moment where they're also developing heritage trails. And I know for a fact that they have got mana whenua involvement over in Portugalika, Russell. So it would be probably an option to reach out to them. And because they're fairly close, you know, you're almost our neighbor down the road, it might be an option to even meet with them face to face, possibly.
Great, and I've just put the funding in for Lincoln for National Services. So they have some funding options that are available to you as well. So have a look through, you'll know what suits. And I can see Bridget's put some great ideas in there in terms of lottery. But yeah, I agree, funding's thin on the ground, and particularly as cost of living and everything is increasing, it's particularly hard to get funding at the moment. So good luck to everyone with that, but however we can support, we will. Monika.
Sorry, I just realized my hand was still up. That's really what there was. But I think what is also really important is because funding is quite limited at the moment, and many of us are, scrambling, trying to fund our programs. It is really good to look for opportunities where we can connect with our local institutions in the area. I mean, we're lucky we're a slightly larger organization in Waitangi, and I really want to make more of an effort to reach out to our local organizations on how we can support each other, because especially when the money is not that easy to come by, maybe there is the expertise or the knowledge or some of the resources that some of us have that others can benefit from. So if there's anybody that you already have a connection with, or you think collaboration with them might help through that rather complex time of price increases, cost of living increases, and limited funding, and then there could be another really good use of your collaborative efforts.
The great example of how you can collaborate and work together for funding and sharing that across. And if it's not your local cultural and heritage sector, it might be your local school. Like Amanda talked earlier about working with the local school, they wanted to understand how the museum could help support the introduction of Aotearoa New Zealand histories. And so while that's got great benefits for Amanda, equally for the school, it's got great benefits. And they may well have some funding available if they're connecting with mana whenua, that they might be able to do so in support with you or in collaboration with you. And you can all potentially access some of that funding. So lots of options out there. Does anyone else have any further examples of collaboration or ideas for funding before we move on? I don't want to let anyone.
See Betty has her hand up.
Great. Okay, over to you, because I'm just reading Bridget's point about I think it was Bridget that said anyway, getting schools into our museum is great. So just want to acknowledge that. But over to you, Becky.
Thank you. Yes. We were fortunate to have someone approach us, and they had the funding to do a project together. And so we've been working with people from, someone from the local library. She's also employed by Maramara Piako District Council. And she asked us to, they're doing a story walk. So they're doing a children's story through the newly formed river walk that's just opened in Morrinsville. And she asked us if we would write panels that would back that story. So when people were moving in one direction, they would read the story. When they were coming back, they would read the history of that particular area. And so I said to Heather, you were lucky your book was written. We're needing to write ours. So it's taken us quite a while to actually get the stories, the history, so that it's accurate. And it tells the story not only of the settlers and things like the railway bridges and how the town was built with steamers coming up the river to deliver goods and things like that, but also with iwi. And I just had another meeting yesterday with Tio Marama, and she said, I am so excited about this. So she had a lot of great stories that we could actually tell that a lot of people would not know as well. So it's been a wonderful collaboration with the library, with Heather Furness, and so really good. So yes,
it's often those chance encounters, isn't it? That all of a sudden, you get together and an idea blooms that can grow into something really beautiful.
Absolutely, yes. No, it's been a delight to work with that. I mean, we're also doing a lot with schools as well. So I've just had a call from the manager to say there is another group coming down, 3 classes coming down next week. So yes, we're very busy with our schools as well.
That's fantastic. That's so good to hear. Thank you, Betty, for sharing that. The other thing that we as heritage educators can, of course, do is share with the volunteers or any of the paid and unpaid staff at other institutions, our understanding of pedagogy, our understanding of the curriculum, and our understanding of how they can reach out to others to promote or to target their programs. We were very fortunate that we were involved with one of our local northern war sites, so a Battle of Waitangi, that has been reinterpreted. They received funding through the Provincial Growth Fund when that was still around. And they were now looking at how do we use this beautiful interpretation and the things that were put in place there to attract school groups. How does that all fit together? So I spent a Sunday with them and a bit of extra time to just see what is there and how could it fit in. And we lent one of our educators for them to trial their programs to see what it could look like. And some things worked and some things didn't quite work, but it's sometimes just the start of something. If one of you knows how the programs can work and can make a start for them, then that group can take it over. So sometimes the really unexpected connections that you make that can make a great difference. And I felt really privileged at the same time to learn about the stories and see it so close up. Something that normally is quite a distance away. Now, Bridget, really good point. Good to have them staying in the local area instead of going into the larger regional museums. Now we have to develop resources to interpret this. I agree, as a regional museum, it is really good if we can attract our visiting school groups to go and look at their local history. And while there's no disrespect at all to Te Papa, like to say that, because Te Papa have their own local histories to tell. And I think that is one of the things that we have found really strongly at Waitangi, that we're talking about what are our stories to tell and what are not our stories to tell. What are mana whenua stories to tell? What are the stories of Kororare Karaso to tell, or anybody else around? And we will only know this if we know what their stories are. So collaboration can also work in the way of, we know what you're doing, so we are not doubling up with you, and we are sticking to our boots. Has anybody experienced anything like that?
I think that's a good point, Monika, because with the introduction of social sciences curriculum, which is now being gazetted in Teacher's Hand, which includes Aotearoa New Zealand histories, schools are looking for information on local stories, local history, local tonga. And sometimes it's our spaces that can tell that, and sometimes it's not, but it's local spaces that can tell that. So it's really important that we work with our schools in that way if we're able to, so that they get that. My fear with history's curriculum, as much as I love it and I'm supportive of it, and I think it's taken a very brave approach to addressing our history through colonisation and use of power and things, is that our students will be sitting in the classroom learning about history when the local awa is just down the road, or the tonga that they're learning about. Instead of seeing it on a screen, you can see it in real life, and that brings it to life. And I know we've got to be funded to do some of this work, but I think when we can work with schools and show the potential, and if there's funding available, but yeah, all fully for supporting the local schools. So Bex, I've just seen there that you've collaborated with 2 maritime archaeologists to create the HMF Buffalo re-examination program, which sounds exciting. I know you and I have talked a little bit about this in the past, but it's really wonderful about how you're working with that community. And now you've won, I didn't realise you'd won 2 public awards for that. So that's amazing. I don't know whether you want to take the mic and talk a little bit about how that came to be. It's okay if you don't, because I know sometimes there's problems with connection for you, but if you want to, I'll just be quiet for a moment and see what happens.
Can you hear me?
Just hear you. You're very faint. Try again.
I've been battling with my headphones. So can you hear me now?
We can just hear you. Give it a go, and we'll let you know. I'll put my hands up if I feel that it's going, or Monika and I can put our hands up, or anyone else if it's just a bit distorted.
Okay. So I'll quickly just say, yes, so we've been working with the re-examination project here in Mercury Bay. And what that was is in 2021, we did a survey of the rep, and we spent also 2 days with the local school, putting through over 400 children through our program. We were asked to nominate that program to the New Zealand Archaeological Association Public Award, which we won, which was fantastic. And then we were also, thank you, we were also asked to nominate it for the Australasian Society for Historical Archaeologists, which was held in Australia recently. We also won that award as well. So one of the judges' comments was low budget, low tech, big effort. So, you know, I'm loving that slogan now. I've said it so many times today. But you're right, it's about community. So we've got the community on board. There's a whole lot of history around the buffalo that connects worldwide. And so it's not just our local history, it goes so much further than that. But it's also the science. So we can have the maritime archaeologists. And today we've just done a media release for our 3D image of the wreck as well. So kids can now put that into a VR and literally swim over top of the wreck without getting in the water. So my next step is to look for VR headsets so that we can do that with the team. But yeah, it's one of those projects that is just growing, and it's got a life of its own, and it just keeps going. So I've now got the school booked in, the local school booked in with 400 kids again for Matariki. We're creating a Matariki exhibition. And then we're also going to relook at the buffalo again in October and do the project again with them. So yeah, it's exciting. Our road is open. So yeah, visitors are short on the ground, so it's nice to get into the education space. I am concerned that our schools don't have the budget. We don't have the budget. We don't have the funding to perform and do this. But they're supporting us in any way they can. So we'll support them in their learning as well.
Wonderful collaboration. And I love the fact that you've been acknowledged not only for doing the project and the quality of it, but that it was acknowledged that you had no funding to do this. And there are times sometimes where we do it because we are passionate about the work. And I think we're all there. So thanks for sharing that, Bex. Lisa, acknowledging your comment about resources and ethics and guidelines. What I'll do is post this webinar is I will share out the form that we use for Raranga Matahiko. It has some guidelines around ethics and stories, and it was also at the time when we took photos, we got, so before the students came in, we had parent permissions too to make sure that any photos that we took we could use, and we identified those students that we couldn't put out. So I'll make sure that that comes your way. And I'm just thinking about time. We've got 10 minutes left, and one of the things that I thought it might be worthwhile, or Monika and I actually thought it would be worthwhile to talk about, is some of the challenges of collaborating. And I don't want to dwell on the negative, but I've been fortunate in a lot of the projects I work with where I have had opportunities to collaborate across organisations, whether it's been in the cultural and heritage sector or whether it's been as an educator, you know, where we've worked across companies to be able to deliver work to schools, and fortunate here to be able to come in to do that. So there are some challenges with it. You know, having a set of agreed rules and ways of operation, I think, is key. That's one thing I've learned, because it's too easy to misunderstand someone, and particularly when there's funding involved, making sure that everyone's very clear on how that funding is being distributed so that nobody thinks other people are getting more than that. I don't know whether you've got anything to add to that, Monika?
I did make myself a little list, you know. We do prepare before we present in the webinar. I think it's key that we all understand what we're doing this for, and that we share this focus. So we all know why we're in this and why we're in this together. The clear communication is super important, because we have the distance in many of these collaborations. We're not just standing next to each other. We don't necessarily see each other's faces. And we know how easy the communication through social media channels can go wrong, you know, because there's something read into it that isn't there. Even with the emails, sometimes we're in a hurry and we write something that doesn't sound quite right. So that is super important. what you already said, you know, how do we work together? What are our roles? You know, do we attend certain meetings? Do we split tasks? Is there some deadlines or so? And how do we all fit together? How does what I do, what Tara does, what somebody else does, how does this all fit into this big picture? So if we can get this right, that makes it much easier. But if we don't get this right, that can be super challenging.
Yeah.
Just quickly going back to the Rādanga Matehiko thing, probably the biggest challenge for us would have been that our individual organizations had their own rules around things. And we all know this, the way we book, the way when we can have people come in and all these kind of things. That was probably a bit of a challenge, you know, the expectations that were there from our organizations. And geographical distance, despite all the online meetings, you know, it is hard because you can't just sit down with a person over a cup of tea and nut something out. Everything you do becomes not scripted. Appointment. You need to make an appointment, you know. And can you be creative on time? You know, on a prescribed time. That's actually really hard to do that. Yeah. So that's probably the biggest challenge that I've seen.
When we were working virtually, it was before COVID, before a lot of our institutions and a lot of the people we were working with were familiar with online platforms. So it took a lot of active facilitation from those of us that were familiar with it to be able to just encourage and show people how it would work. But when you get it right, it works really well. And I can see, Monika, you've acknowledged Debbie's got a question just before we go to that. It might be just worth touching on when collaborations work, you know, just some of the benefits that can happen from those. And I guess to some degree, we've talked about a lot of that, and I've loved the examples that people have shared. But yeah, I think that clear understanding right from the get-go and having memorandums of understanding, if you need to formalise it, which possibly if funding is involved, it's good to have a memorandum of understanding. It doesn't need to be complicated, but it just outlines what's happening and then people understand. But, you know, I'm sure with Amanda's work and some of the other examples, there hasn't needed to be MOUs or memorandums about that. But when there's funding involved, it's often good just to see that's there. Now, Monika, I've missed Debbie's chat question in the chat. So have you got that to hand?
Sorry, Debbie just put up her hand earlier. Debbie,
okay, sorry, Debbie, off you go.
Sorry, I couldn't find the little symbol thing. I was a heritage librarian for 18 years, so we did big projects like World War 100, Suffrage 125, Battle of Gate Park commemoration, and Matariki. We revived that whole thing. So I think it depends on who's driving your project. Someone who can cross iwi, cross other heritage organisations, it's really useful. And bringing everyone on board with you is really, really important. The latest project is the Brain Watkins House in Tauranga, which is, we only took over in March, so we're a new committee and everything's just been left, but we have a lot of work to do. It's about a 40-hour-a-week job, unpaid at the moment for me. So what we're developing is the Aotearoa Histories curriculum, and we're looking at those, you know, know, understand, learn. I'm just getting my head around all that. But we're also working with the ALMS, who are like our sister organisation. And I had a very good relationship with the person at the ALMS anyway. But talking to them, making sure that we're telling different stories. He's telling before at the ALMS in Tauranga is telling from 1836 to up to the New Zealand Wars. There will be a museum here at some stage telling the story of Pukehinahina, all the New Zealand War stuff, and then we'll tell a story. It will be the colonial history, which, but it will be 1881 to 1979. So just telling the story across all of that, putting together a curriculum is quite interesting and intense. So any ideas around that? It's really good, using our objects in the museum to tell stories. Yeah, that's where we are. So very interested in ideas.
It sounds like such a great collaboration, doesn't it? You know, to span through the various organizations. I've met Andrew from the Elms, and of course our ex-TO has gone to Tauranga to develop the new museum. So one of these days we will have to go and do a roadly from the Waitangi Treaty Grounds down to see all you guys down there. But that's a really great example, in my opinion. You know, how are we telling our stories? How do we understand what else we're doing? And no doubt there will be lots of cross-pollination going on.
And I like too that as a community of cultural and heritage practitioners, you've got together and thought, what stories are ours to tell? If we tell this, what's missing from our story and where can we direct teachers to? But equally, you know what your stories are. You know, it's just so great when we work together. It's that we rather than that I, you know, we're here to serve our community. That's what our spaces do. And so being able to do that as a collective is great when we've got opportunities. And I appreciate it's hard when you're time poor, but when we have that chance and can just even pick up the phone and ring someone or hop on a Zoom call and just talk through things, it's great. Debbie, one of the questions you asked was talking about getting to think more about object-based learning and more about the curriculum Aotearoa New Zealand histories. So I don't know whether you're familiar with some of our Future Learn courses, but we've got some on the Future Learn platform. One in particular is on object-based learning. There's another one on, Monika, you'll be able to remind me, but it introduces the curriculum a little bit and best practices there as well. And plus we've got some webinars on our website, which I'm sure the links are coming through while I'm talking, or I'll put them in very shortly into the chat so that you've got them. With Aotearoa New Zealand Histories coming in, we've done a few webinars on that to help understand and break down what that is, but we will be doing some more later this year, because along with Aotearoa New Zealand Histories going into the curriculum, there's Te Matai Aho, which is the new curriculum that's coming out. And so from that curriculum, so we've currently got the NZC in place, the New Zealand curriculum for English medium schools. Te Matai Aho sets out a really great vision and statement that we all need to be aware of, because it talks about the community connectedness. But within that, all curriculum areas are going to follow the understand, know, do model. So while literacy and numeracy may not be something we draw heavily on, I think they'll probably all be under parts of our programs, but they're not something we teach directly to. All of those curriculum learning areas are following the understand, know, do, and the progressions that happen within the in the school. So we will do some more webinars on that. They will come later in the year, but thank you, Monika, for putting all those links into the chat, which are very useful, particularly if you haven't seen that. And the webinars on our website, everything's free. And the Future Learn courses, I will just state again, they do charge you after a while, but we've tried to write them and expand them out so that you can do the course before you need to pay for them. So my advice for our Future Learn courses is find some when you've got some time and it's not a busy time for you, so that you can sit down and work through them.
Just to come back to the Future Learn courses for a moment, you will notice that the link says Te Papa in there as well. And if you're surprised about that, is Te Papa generously supported the Te Pūtiake Monotanga team to get this done. And because Te Papa being the National Museum, they were able to pull strings, make this happen for us that Te Pūtiake Monotanga couldn't quite have achieved on our own. And that's why Partners Te Papa is sitting up on there. If you click on that, you see 5 online courses we've written. The very first one was more aimed on online delivery for those of us that couldn't bring kids in to our institutions at the time. Since then, we've had a course on the curriculum and how we can support the different curriculum documents with learning and culture and heritage sites. Best practices, which we mentioned earlier. We have done a course on object-based learning, as Tara just mentioned, and then one on connecting, different ways of reaching out and connecting. Now, while writing these, we have learned a lot, content-wise, but also about how to write them. And one of these things is what Tara alluded to. There is a limited time that you're allowed to do the course for free, and then it expires. So we've learned about that the very last course. We've drawn out quite a bit. So there's only a little bit of learning every week. But there have been some very smart cookies in this in our membership who have more than one email address to sign up to a course for free. Or in our organization, what we've done is we've decided on one email address, and I've paid the access for that course and all our team can hop on onto the course through that email address, and therefore, you know, it remains accessible to us. But in addition, I've put in the TPTMT website. Sorry, it didn't hyperlink for some reason. TPTMT.com, that's the website that has all our resources, has all our recorded webinars. This one will go up on there as well eventually when we get around to doing that without the lovely Mel employed. It's just a little bit harder. And then we've got two Facebook platforms. We have got the TPTMD page, which is like a static Facebook page, and we've got our private Facebook group. If you're a Facebook chatter, if you've got questions on there, please come and join that group. I've just admitted 2 new members today or yesterday. There's a question behind which their membership lies, because we want to make sure it is people from our sector that are joining in there.
Kia ora. Now we are running to time. Just before we close off, I'd like to thank you all for coming along. It's wonderful to be back doing this. And if you are interested in hosting a webinar or sharing something, or you've got a particular topic, feel free to email me. I'll put my email address in the chat now. Most of you will have got it anyway through the newsletter, chair@tptmt.com. We're really interested to hear what your ideas are and what your needs are. Just a reminder, we are a volunteer committee, so it's only as much as we can do in our space. But I can tell you we're a committed bunch of people, and what we are interested in is advocating for the sector and upskilling our sector. So if we can make that happen, that's what we will continue to do. Monika, I would like to thank you for coming along and for your time. Always great to work with you. And to hear your expertise, collaboration, both through the RM Raranga Matihiko project, but also through the other work that you're doing up in your community. It's very, very valued. And thank you to the rest of you that made contributions. It's lovely to see so many friendly faces online. And yeah, thank you for your contributions.
It's great to have everybody back, and thank you so much. Even if we haven't acknowledged your comment in the chat, it has been read, so thank you so much, and looking forward to seeing you all online again soon.
I'll close this off with karakia. Whakatakati hau ki te uru, whakatakati hau ki te tonga, kia mākina kina ki uta, kia mātaratara ki tai, I hia ki ana, te atakura, he teo, he hoka, he huhu, te he Māori ora. Enjoy the rest of your week, everyone. See you next time. Ka kite.